I wanted to go to that creator light. It sounded pretty juicy and yummy. That felt like peace. Why not? And yet these images begin to come through, and the images are the earth. And one of them is this circle, this beautiful citrine circle of light surrounding the earth. And it's this beautiful, peaceful energy, just like the creator's light and just like the angelic light. And around the earth are all of these beings. And the hands are kind of touching, but they're emitting this beautiful citrine light, and everybody has their hands around this earth and they're emitting the light towards the earth. They don't tell me what this means. They don't call it a great awakening or an evolution in consciousness, yet they say, this is why you signed up. This is why it's been so hard, and you're not alone in these trauma stories, and you've survived all these decades for a reason, and every one of them is like you, and every one of them is here to help Earth right now. And if you go back, you will be part of that circle of light.
Well, hello, Brooke Grove. Welcome to the show. I'm truly honored by you joining me and looking forward to our conversation. How are you feeling today?
I'm wonderful, Brad. Thank you for having me.
Well, so am I, and I'm looking forward to this. And I got to tell you, every week, we bring you powerful stories about life after death, awakening, and what it means to be human. And if that resonates, you'll love what's coming. Today, I am joined by Brooke Grove, a spiritual healer with roots in mind-body psychology and shamanic energy medicine. Now, Brooke's near-death experience followed a catastrophic medication reaction that shut down her liver, and it led to a 3-day coma and an out-of-body view of the ICU, right down to the staff in yellow suits and purple gloves. And in the cosmos, she encountered loving light beings, learned about her soul contract, and chose to return, re-entering her body by following a piercing flashlight. Now, the experience unlocked gifts, perceiving auras, medical intuition, and a mission to transmute trauma into service. So, Brooke, it is a joy to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad. It's an honor.
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting you in Chicago at the last IANS conference, the International Association with Near-Death Studies. That was amazing, that conference in general. And to meet you was great. And thank you for agreeing to jump on the program with me.
Of course. It's a pleasure.
Well, cool. So, I know you have this great story and you've told it many times and I just love it. And so I know it'd be great to share it with the guests today. And then I'd love to go into some conversation with you about it, to feel how your life changed afterwards and how you've integrated it in. And then, kind of your role at IANS and then beyond, helping all the souls on the planet that you do. So I figured to start off, I should give you the microphone and the stage and let you tell the dramatic story of the NDE.
Absolutely. Let's circle back to 2010. That was the year that my coma occurred. In the years prior, I had been struggling with complex autoimmunity. It was a bit of a shapeshifter regarding diagnosis, so I did not trust what was being told to me by the medical practitioners as the diagnosis was not consistent. Thus, I went to Johns Hopkins University, which had the leading autoimmune research center in the world at that time for treatment. However, before I get to Hopkins to receive said treatment, I have a flare-up. At the time, it was attacking my lungs. They had diagnosed it as COPD, and I have severe asthma atop that, and it was attacking the kidneys. There was no awareness that my liver was involved per the current medical test. And so I take this medication according to doctors' encouragement. I am told you will see your new treatment team soon. This medicine will help. You only have a couple days to get through. Just double the dose. Well, again, no one understood the liver was compromised. When I took the medication, which contained Tylenol ended up shutting my liver down. The liver was already failing, unbeknownst to anyone. And that amount of it, benign to a healthy person, actually caused the complete crash of the liver. When the liver rapidly crashed, I fell, hit my head. That created a traumatic brain injury. And then from there, the liver took the kidneys and the lungs with it. So in a matter of moments from taking this medication, I'm launched into systemic organ failure of the liver, the kidneys, and the lungs. and I incur a traumatic brain injury. I have no awareness until I'm in ICU. I do not remember taking the medication, nor falling, nor anything that happened after. However, in ICU, I am catapulted out of the body and I am consciousness watching this scene, and it looks like ER or the X-Files, like some television show. Everyone's just really intense and they're doing everything to save this body, and I'm curious about this body and I want to interact with this body and understand what they're trying to save and who this person is. And I look down and realize that's my body. And there's also this, what's wrong with it? Because the body's all swollen and they're doing all this life-saving intervention, and I don't know what's happened. So I think I'm in this dream, but at the same token, there's an attachment to this body, like a wanting to connect with it, wanting to be with it, a wanting to care for it. And at this moment that I'm connected to it and I have this attachment, suddenly I'm catapulted at like the speed of light into the space that I have so tenderly called the cosmos, for nothing else really compares to it. It was as if you took NASA's best images and took the saturation all the way up. Just pools and pools and pools of blackness, velvety, delicious voids that were not scary. There was nothing terrifying about them. In a way, it was comforting to be in those spaces as I accelerated out of the physical realm. And also, there were beautiful symphonies of Christ-like color. I mean, just jewel tones in epiphanies and resonance and ways that colors have not expressed themselves on this earth walk, to me at least. And these beautiful jewel tones were the first thing to greet me that was not darkness. And these tones were so welcoming, so familiar. I had known these tones. I had grown up with these tones. I had seen those same colors, those same expressions as an intuitive child and had called them my angels. And suddenly I was with them, and everything that I had experienced in this earth walk was just sort of, in a way, erased in a bath of peace. Just pure peace, and being in the familiar comfort of these lights, which to me, there was this beautiful, beautiful emerald, this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ruby, and this beautiful amethyst. And then throughout those three colors danced this ever-moving blue that was everywhere, but in kind of, whereas the other colors were static in a way, this one was kind of in everything. Kind of the blue kind of waved through it, almost like the ocean and sea foam. And so I'm in this space and I'm just being held. And to call it being held is really an understatement, because truthfully, I'm being enveloped. I'm being, in a way, baptized by this light. Everything is clearing off of me. All pain, all worries, anything that would have been of a lower vibration or an earthly experience is gone. And there is just this love, this ineffable, indescribable, unexplainable love and peace and bliss and freedom. And I am just complete, and everything is perfect as it is. Nothing is being said. Nothing is being communicated per se in the way we would call communication. And yet every sense is amplified. As I said, color is just another threshold beyond what I can describe. There's a sound, almost like a vibration or a humming, or that continually goes through everything. And I begin to notice that as these lights kind of dance through this cosmos light space, whenever they're in resonance with each other, the colors shift a bit. When my consciousness comes closer to them, they shift a bit. And intuitively, I begin to understand that I can communicate with these lights and they're communicating with me. So I ask very quietly and softly, but with also a certain certitude, just for validation, are you the angels that were with me as a child, and they said, in this lifetime and many others. And yet it wasn't through words as I'm expressing it to you. It was through an inner knowing. You would ask a question or you would think something, and there was an instantaneous awareness. And that awareness was your felt sense, your felt answer. But there was a homecoming to it. Just again, a tenderness. I felt as if, in a way, when I look back in hindsight, I was being held with a generosity and connection that I had been denied in this earth walk. So that was just revolutionary for my spirit. And as I sang in these vibrations and this peace and this bliss, I began to become very aware of a light pulling me towards it. And this light was unlike the angelic lights. It was not a jewel tone. It was not soft. Although they were very, very bright, the angels, they were also soft. There was something delicate about their energy. This was, in a way, piercing. It was potent. It was powerful, and it was calling. And so I came towards that light, but I was being pulled towards it. And without doing anything, just in that space, it was anchoring me and pulling me towards it. And as I go to it, I start to receive more messages. And the best earthly term would probably be downloads. It's just like this awareness that comes in and these images that come through. And my angelics make it very clear that that light is where all things come from. It is the Creator's light. It is what we are all fractals of. Everything that is animated with life force energy comes from this, and everything returns to it. And I now have a choice. I can go back to that body that I had so many feelings for when I first viewed it, and I can complete this earth walk, or I can choose to go back to the light. And it's my choice. And as they're announcing that opportunity, and I'm still going towards the magnetic light, the Creator light, there's images that start coming through. And there was also an acknowledgement of the pain of the earth experience. So for me, I'm a complex trauma survivor. I went through decades of trauma. And the awareness that I was going to go back to a diseased body that was suffering and that was going to go back to a family system that wasn't very welcoming wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to that Creator light. It sounded pretty juicy and yummy. That felt like peace. Why not? And yet these images begin to come through, and the images are the earth. And one of them is this circle, this beautiful citrine circle of light surrounding the earth. And the earth has this like diamond white fire coming out of her. And it's this beautiful, peaceful energy, just like the Creator's light and just like the angelic light. And around the earth are all of these beings. I wouldn't call them human per se. They didn't look like us. And yet they had humanoid features like hands. And the hands are kind of touching, almost, not quite. They're not physically laying on each other. They're kind of like this, but they're emitting this beautiful citrine light, and everybody has their hands around this earth and they're emitting the light towards the earth. Now, they don't tell me what this means. They don't call it a great awakening or an evolution in consciousness. This was not any kind of terminology that was introduced to me. Yet they say, in no uncertain terms, this is why you signed up. This is why it's been so hard. And you're not alone in these trauma stories. And you've survived all these decades for a reason. And every one of them is like you. And every one of them is here to help Earth right now. And if you go back, you will be part of that circle of light. And so I just know, I feel it in the core of my consciousness as I'm just an orb myself in this space that I want to return, that I want to go back. And they make it very clear. The number 10 kept coming through, and I didn't understand what that meant. It was 2010, mind you, when this happens. I wouldn't understand until 2020 the relevance of the 10. But for 10 years, I don't tell my story. And so this 10 keeps coming up, and it's pivotal because so many of the people that come into the path later show up in 2020 as I start sharing my story as well. And so this 10 was a symbol. They let me know that the suffering would be worse for a period of time, and it was the 10. And so I then am like, okay, well, I understand that there's this number that's significant. I understand there's going to be people that help. How do I get back? Sign me up. Like, I'm here for it. Suddenly, all of the care about the body and the pain and the trauma is gone, and I just want to get back to the body. I want to help that light. And so I asked my guides and my angels, how do I get back to the body? I mean, we're in the cosmos. Every direction I look, it's like endless voids of blackness and light. And they tell me to look for the light unlike any others. Well, I'm floating around trying to find this light, and everything I see is this celestial, comforting, beautiful, angelic, like, kind of making it hard to want to get out of there light. And then suddenly I see these two lights that are delicious but curious. They're not quite like the angels. They're definitely not like the creator light. They're not magnetizing me. They're not communicating through inner knowing as the angels did. They're just there. And they're definitely different. So I pause and I engage with these two lights. One is this beautiful indigo. The other one is this wonderful wild leafy green. And I noticed that they're not communicating and they're not pulling the way the creator light did. So I think they're curious and I want to understand them, and I'm intellectually stimulated by what they're doing there, yet they're not communicating. And so I pivot and I move on. It would not be for many years later that I discovered what those lights were. As I left those lights, I then start to anchor in on a light that is very, for lack of better terms, hellish. It was artificial. It was a flashlight. And so I anchor in on this flashlight and boom, I'm back in the body. The body is strapped down to a bed. I had PICC lines going into both sides of my brain because the fall had created a traumatic brain injury in the coma, and they had declared me 1% chance of waking up from this coma. I'd been read my last rites. My family was prepared for death. Suddenly, I'm catapulted back in. No idea what's happening to a body strapped down on the bed. And the most wild juxtaposition you can imagine from coming from this peaceful, poetic, ineffable, loving, beatific space to this white room, after effects, thriving, didn't even know what after effects were at that time, and we'll get into that. But suddenly, I'm back. And I have no concept what happened or how I got there.
Oh my goodness. What a story. So, that is amazing because you're on the other side and you were given the choice. And this happens often. Now, clearly, if your choice is, I'm going to stay, I'm not going back, well, we would never really hear your story, would we? Because you wouldn't come back to tell it. But obviously, you made the choice. Now, it's interesting that your body was in a coma and it had a 1% chance of return. Now, like, even your body didn't expect you to return. Everyone's like, oh, you came back? We didn't really think you would. So, you had all the medical issues with the lungs and the kidney and the liver, all shutting down. And then also, the brain concussion and injury and so forth. So that's a lot to come back for. So that was you. You landed in that space. And so I know we can talk about the after effects, but I want to ask you something else about your experience on the other side. Mm-hmm. You'd mentioned a few interesting words. You said you felt love and peace and bliss and freedom. Mm-hmm. Those are the words you're using. Love and peace and bliss, I hear a lot. I think the freedom one is a nice new one. Tell me what that felt like to you and what that meant.
For me, as I've mentioned, I was a complex trauma survivor, and the body was very much a part of the abuses. And so not having the body, it was like this liberation, realizing that, I was fully me. I was my awareness. I was my consciousness. Yet I was liberated from this kind of, animal that had been so constraining in some ways to my spirit. So it's almost like, everything when you're in the body is very finite. It's form, it's tangible, it's, part of the 3D. Yet when you're in that space, you are part of the infinite. And that is freedom.
The freedom from kind of pain, because kind of if you have this pain, whether it's trauma, physical, emotional, it feels like a kind of a burden, a prison in some sense, because you're just trapped in it and you have no way out of it. And maybe it's just going on and on and on. And I guess when you get to the other side, on this side, we have these 5 senses that we have. We all know what those are. And they're very limiting compared to the other side, I would imagine. So you get to the other side, and you have far more degrees of perception, maybe 360-degree view, and time isn't the same. And, the senses just really open up to something way beyond our 5. And yet at the same time, the pain is actually gone. And so that's interesting. On this side here, if it's super cold and it's the winter, it's like cold. But if it's summertime and it's really hot, you can feel the heat. But if you find the temperature is exactly the same as the skin temperature of your body, you might not feel anything at all, So they have those chambers that you'll get into where they try to do that sensory deprivation, right? So how can you explain the notion of 5 senses limited here, and then when you got to the other side, it was kind of unlimited? Is there a way to describe that?
I don't know. I always feel that every word we use to describe these experiences it just fails. Our language captures like a small spectrum of actually where these sensory experiences go. And I find, so many NDErs write books, and I've struggled with my own because putting the stuff into language is so difficult at times. So I don't know. I mean, that's truthfully my answer. I don't feel that anything I choose is adequate for that feeling.
Well, I know what you mean, because we live in this 4-dimensional space. It's sort of X, Y, Z, 3 dimensions plus time. And yet you try to talk about 5 dimensions or 6 dimensions, and how could you even visualize it or describe it? It's beyond. And so that makes sense. But when you were over there experiencing that thing, did you mention something about you experienced and sensed the connection with your angels, and then found that those angels had been with you throughout your life, throughout your childhood?
Yes. I mean, instantaneously, the colors were so familiar to me. I had drawn them. I've been an artist and creative person my whole life. And I have journals from childhood where I would just paint and draw these same colors over and over and over and over again. So whether that's their organic way of being or they chose to appear that way to me for comfort, it was what it was. But there was a knowingness that these were multidimensional beings that had existed with me, not just in this lifetime, but many before. And it was also made known to me, as I flirted with the creator light and toyed with the decision to come back or not, that whether I stayed or I went, they would be with me again and again and again. So in a way, it was a soul family reunion. I recognized them. They were kind of the welcoming team. In my experience, I didn't have, ascended masters or family greet me. Everything was light. Yet them showing up the way that they did and the way that they showed up in ICU, because again, I wake up strapped to a bed with multiple organs failing and my after effects are on. And for days, they thought I was not awake. They thought I was having rapid eye movement. I couldn't communicate. I was intubated. So I have nurses coming and going for days and I'm in there, but I can't get anyone to notice. And at some point, I started, getting pretty panicked and started kind of losing it a bit. And I was training to be a psychologist at the time, and everything in my indoctrination from my education taught me to stay calm and to meditate and to do all the things to keep my heart down. Well, eventually I realized I was doing too good of a job at that because they weren't noticing that I was in there. So I just let panic go. And at that point, my vitals went crazy. And a nurse came over, and at that point she finally communicated to me, and she's like, can you hear me? Blink once for yes, twice for no. And I started blinking my left eye. And we started communicating. And at that point, she's like, she's awake. And I was like, thank you, because I'd been in there for so long. But as I was going through that, I bring that story up because I said to the angels at this point, I don't know if that was a dream. I don't know what just happened. I don't even know what happened to my body. Like, I'm so confused. Whether or not it was a dream, if you're real, I need you now. Like, I need to hear, I need you on the ground, we need to do something. And then that's when I got the guidance to allow the body to panic and that someone would come. And from that moment forward, I realized I could communicate with them and that they would give me intuitive answers and sometimes direct answers, or sometimes they send an earth angel. And that's how in ICU that I begin to heal the organ damage.
Oh, okay, good. So you're blinking so they know you're in there. They know not to shut off life support. And then hopefully soon enough, you got the intubation sort of out of the way so that you could communicate, and then the process of healing and so forth. And so is this what you mean by after effects?
So after effects are a term within the near-death community referring to some what many would call extraordinary abilities that come on after a near-death experience. There can also be difficult ones like mental health issues, et cetera, as you're learning to integrate. But for the purposes of what I'm describing sensory after effects, which are gifts, psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, things that you mentioned in your introduction, like the medical intuition, things that come on after a close encounter with death. For me, I wear contacts. I'm very, 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 very poorly oriented when it comes to vision. So I'm nearly blind without my contacts or glasses. And when I woke up from coma, I didn't have contacts in, and I obviously didn't have glasses on while I was comatose. So I opened my eyes, and while I'm unable to communicate and no one knows I'm in there, one of the first things I notice is that everything has this like tapestry over it. Like if there's a physical thing like this cup, there would be like a tapestry over it, and all the stuff is moving. And I'm like, what is that film, that like thing on top of everything? It's on people, it's on the computer stuff, you know, all the technology that's to my right. It's on my hands if I could like move them a little bit, which was difficult because again, I was strapped down from the PICC line. But I'm noticing that this film is there. And the only thing I can deduce, being a scientist by training, is that they've given me medication. I must be on some drugs. Like, I don't know what's happened to me. I'm on drugs. Okay, the drugs will wear off. Everything will be fine. Don't panic. But I start noticing once the staff starts interacting with me and I'm awake and they're starting to inform me of things, I start noticing that this tapestry seems to respond to emotion. And I noticed that like my family is saying one thing, but this tapestry is suggesting something else, and it's changing colors and it's moving all over the place. And I'm like, what is going on? These drugs are really wonky. Get me off these drugs. So as soon as I get a piece of paper after the intubator comes out, you still can't talk for like 3 or 4 days after they take an intubator out because your throat's just raw. And so as I was prepping myself to talk again, I was writing everything by hand, and I had to write with my left hand because I still had that PICC line on this side. And so I'm writing with my non-dominant hand, and I just write, please stop the drugs, you know? And at that point, a nurse is like, what are you talking about, sweetie? She's like, your liver failed. You can't take Benadryl. She's like, you're not on any medication. And I'm like, what am I seeing? And then I'm like, okay, it's the brain injury. Of course it's the brain injury. I bumped my head, so I'm seeing stuff. And so I'm telling the neurologist, like, when will this go away? When will these colors go away? And they're like running all these tests, and they're like, your brain, like, healed. You're awake. You're fine. There's no cognitive damage. And I'm just like, how is this possible? Because I'm seeing all this stuff. Well, rather than drive myself crazy, which was an option, but not a good one, I chose to, work with it. And I began to notice that, I had one doctor who would come to the bed and he was always doom and gloom. I was studying psychology at the time, and he didn't have a favorable opinion on psychology. So he was always like joshing me about why I didn't become a real doctor. And it wasn't like the best bedside manner, right? So I would want to distract myself from his doom and gloom because he would talk about how I needed a new liver and I was going to be in a wheelchair and I would never have children. And it was just like all negative, and I didn't want to hear it. And so I start paying attention to his colors more than what he's saying. And all of a sudden, I hear him, and I mean hear. It was coming through my ears. Think to himself, I really need a cigarette. I just need to get done so I can go have a cigarette. And I blurt out, go smoke already. He jumps like 5 feet back, and I'm like, well, you're thinking about it. And he just looks at me, and I'm like, oh yeah, he doesn't smell like smoke. He doesn't. And I just blurted that out. And he looked terrified. And at that point, I was like, okay, maybe I'm picking something up, like an antenna. And I'm like, but maybe it's just, I'm ultra sensitive because I hit my head and it'll go away. It was quite the opposite. In the weeks, the months, the years to come forward, I would see this intensify and intensify and intensify. Thankfully, I had studied enough transpersonal psychology to understand the chakras and to understand enough quantum physics to convince myself that I was somehow seeing the quantum field. And when I convinced myself of that, because I noticed that everyone's expression would shift based on the integrity of what they were saying. So if someone was speaking with love, they would light up with this beautiful light, and everything would be this beautiful aligned color. However, if someone was speaking from fear or trepidation, the colors would shift, the energy would shift, it would get chaotic. So in a way, it was like a truth teller, and not one that I asked for, but one that I got. And so I began to play with that, and through playing with that, and talking to the angels and having them respond in frequency and color and sound, I was able to slowly learn how to heal the organs using hands, using touch. Much like the angels or the beings that I saw in my NDE, where the hands were almost touching but not quite. It's very similar to how the angels ended up instructing me to put my hands above the organs and then channel the colors, the different colors of those angels into the organs. Now, I wouldn't know for many years later because I had not studied this prior. But in traditional Chinese medicine, the organs that I had fail, which are the lungs, the kidneys, and the liver, the lungs tend to have a correlation with grief and sorrow, unexpressed sorrow. The kidneys are fear, and the liver is anger. And so for each of those correlations, there was a strong case to be made for my history having a role in those particular organs being compromised, in addition to the medical error. As for many, many, many years, I suppressed the grief of my childhood trauma. For many, many years, I lived in fear because it was reoccurring for 6 years over and over and over again. And in addition to that, there was a lot of anger, a lot of righteous rage because I was a child and I didn't deserve it. And yet when you're in an abusive environment as a child and you have to survive, you do things you're not always so proud of. And a lot of that rage, rather than being cast out and expressed in healthful ways, I had turned against myself. And so the liver had a lot of chi or energy to move as well.
Well, this is pretty amazing that you were able to identify the root cause of the ailment, which was this pent up, fear, anger, and all these other emotions that you had, and you suppressed them, and you knew the frequency of each one of these and how they attacked each different part of your body. And then through the connection with the angels, you're able to use your hands to direct energy and light and frequency in to heal them. And that healed the organs themselves. But what did you do to address the root cause? Because that would have still been there in your life.
Well, inflammation was the root cause of it all. And the inflammation was coming from so many of those emotions. I had been what in psychology we would call a textbook undoer. So for the aforementioned self-abuses and just like rage that I mentioned from my teenage years, I went into my early 20s in the complete opposite direction, where I was just earning degree after degree and, going on this, overachiever's path to kind of undo the harms of the past and to find a way to pay it forward and to work with other people and help them. Well, unfortunately, I pushed too hard. I was taking 20 credits. I was on my second master's at 25, going into my PhD, and just pushing, pushing, pushing. And it was a trauma response, and I couldn't see it because it was a healthy trauma response compared to the other ones. And my body fought back, a testament to the wisdom of the body. When I was in that first master's degree, I had acknowledged my trauma history with my professor in a project. And she was really smitten with the idea of me writing my thesis on it. And I wanted nothing to do with that because I had really distanced from it. I had appropriate boundaries with it. I was in therapy. Everything was really good on the surface of my life. But she kept pushing, and she was my dean, and she was the head of the program, and I wanted to make her happy, and I wanted to be a good student. And so I took on that paper, and that paper was about my own trauma. I actually entitled it Re-Traumatization Anxiety because at the time we weren't diagnosing PTSD for older traumas. It was a current, acute, kind of thing. And we didn't have the language of complex PTSD at that time. And so I went into it, and that's when the inflammation begins. As I start writing that paper, the inflammation sets in, and that continues leading us up into 2010. So for me, it became really imperative when I came out and understood that our perception is our power, that basically what we think, we create. And that was being made manifest by what I was seeing. I mean, I was literally witnessing it on other people and witnessing it on myself. Simply, case in point, doctors are telling me I will not get out of the hospital before Christmas. They're playing Christmas music nonstop. It was early December when I woke up. And there's nothing worse than being stuck in ICU, hearing code red, code blue, and nonstop Christmas music. Okay. So I really wanted to get out of there. And they kept telling me it's impossible. And I was like, nothing's impossible. I believe I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of here. And sure enough, I got out right before Christmas and didn't have to listen to that music anymore. But it became that I'm going to choose to get better. I'm going to choose to get these organs well. And so the inflammation is the same thing. I still have a sensitivity to inflammation, and I still have asthma. And as a lung failure survivor, it's quite severe. But the choice is always, what am I treating inflammatory? Because I can notice, like it's raining right now, and rain can trigger it. It cleans the air, but it also moves the debris. So that can be triggering for an asthmatic. And yet I'm not symptomatic right now, because I'm aware the rain was coming in. We were well aware of it, and I was prepared for it. And also, I'm choosing the frequency of love to approach my lungs right now, not the frequency of fear or grief or a lower vibration. And by meeting inflammation with the frequency of love, it dissolves. All things dissolve in the power of unconditional love. So it's been an awareness that I suffered for years with deeply inflammatory thoughts that I turned inward. Those thoughts became physical disease. And so the awareness is, how do I live a life in a tender, compassionate way, wherein even if shame or some of these old emotions arises, rather than having an inflammatory attack, kind of fight or flight response, I soften, I welcome it, I treat it with kindness. And in that compassionate tenderness, inflammation has a way of coming down. And a lot of water helps.
Yeah, and a lot of water helps for sure. Well, I tell you, that is an interesting assessment right there, because it affects everyone, I think, the same way. Everybody is going to have these sort of mental emotions and packaging things up and not letting them go. And they're going to cause inflammation and cause these issues in their body. And so what you're doing is ideal and could benefit, everyone. So how can you do this? What's the focus? Is it meditation? Is it going inward? And, in today's world where there's constant interruptions and distractions, how do you stay focused in that without getting pulled away?
Well, I totally empathize and relate to the many distractions and the ways of the world. I'm a single parent and I have 2 little boys. So I'm constantly multitasking. And that's kind of the trick. You have to create a lifestyle where the tools, and you kind of have to learn. I'm going to be honest. I had to learn what resonates with me. I am super sensitive. So I know that I am sensitive to aromatherapy. I know that I'm sensitive to crystals. I know that I'm sensitive to certain things that can help me. So in my house, and I always joke when my friends come over because they're like, wow, you have one of your self-care kits everywhere. Why do you need so many? And I'm like, because if I look in the other direction and there's one not there, I might grab the remote or do something that's like not healthy, So I basically have created in every room of my house, there is a kit just to help me come back to center, to find my center, whether it's just like, essential oil sprays, whether it's grounding crystals that help pull me down, whether it's oracle cards with angel messages that just bring me back to the awareness that we are not alone. They're everywhere. And my children have that as well in each and every room. It's just a reminder, even with my purse, I'm someone that doesn't like to carry a lot of stuff. But I always carry a bag that has essential oils in it, that has certain crystals, that has an oracle deck, just things to ground and anchor back in. If you think of all the times we mindlessly distract ourselves with screens or social media or whatever, we can easily pivot and pause for 60 seconds to do something as simple as pull a card, or, you kind of have to learn your love language with spirit. I'm someone that likes color. So I've also made my home in colors that remind me of certain frequencies. This room right here is for the angels of compassion. So they are pink. And so everything in here is rose quartz. And so those kind of things help me. If I'm working on a project, I might color code it. So if I want to, like my book, the chapter I'm working on right now, it's turquoise and citrine. Turquoise being the higher heart chakra, citrine being the solar plexus, your power. And so just bringing in that higher awareness to your power center. So little things like that. And you kind of learn, anything that lights you up, that gets you excited, whether it's music or art or entertainment, those things are cues from God. Those are your love languages from God. And when you pay attention to those love languages from God, you get closer to God. So anything that lights you up and makes you happy, that's your way of saying thank you. And thank you is the holiest prayer, because when we are grateful, we welcome more and more and more abundance and cultivate it everywhere. So really just learning how God speaks to you, how you light up, and then how can you implement that into your day to day and make it readily available so that it's not like an option you forget about. That readily available part is super, super important, especially when you talk about the distraction and the busyness of the world.
Oh yeah, I love the notion of being thankful and being grateful all the time. Get into that habit and it can really help you. You live a life and there's a lot of triggers out there that might trigger you down the wrong road of emotion, but it seems like you've planted these little kits in every room in your house to kind of trigger you, to pull you back away from the distractions of the world. And it's kind of interesting because as you do this throughout the day, you're kind of reprogramming your subconscious mind to remember to do this all the time, so that over time, you don't even need to see those little reminder kits. You'll just know throughout the day to bring yourself back inside, be grounded, and find all the peace and the love and the bliss and the freedom that you found on the other side. Try to have, a little heaven on earth, right? And so it seems like that can really help. Now, you know what? I got to ask you though, when you were coming back and you had your after effects and you had seeing the auras around people, depending on their mood, colors and all that, and then even feeling kind of the emotions of maybe what they're thinking even, have you developed those more?
Well, for me, I was pretty pretty standard in NDE terms. We have a dark night of the soul that most people experience in the first 7 to 10 years post NDE. We lose about, this statistic's old, it's from my friend PMH Atwater, but I do believe we need new research on this, but I'm going to say it because it is one of the standards. We lose about 7% of adult experiencers and 21% of childhood experiencers to ending their own lives, okay? And I was really textbook in the sense that I struggled those first 7 to 10 years. It wasn't until really about the 9th year that I came kind of out of that completely. It was a lot of back and forth. You're kind of either all for the NDE and everything that it impacted or really against it. Now, remember, I was a PhD candidate. I was about to defend my dissertation. I had put 13 years into academia. I loved clinical psychology. And then suddenly I wake up with after effects that my own field would stigmatize and pathologize. I did not feel safe talking to someone like me because I knew how they were trained, you know? And I knew what they were going to say. I knew that at worst, they might label me full-on psychotic, at best schizoaffective, which just means I have some wild belief systems and kind of color outside the lines. But these weren't belief systems. These were things that were actually transpiring for me. And so for a while, I really tried to be Brooke, the, top of her class, overachiever, still be a clinician. I went back to school. I was going to defend that paper, even though I honestly didn't believe in it. I tried to change the paper to be more aligned to what I was becoming, and they wouldn't allow me to because I'd been already through the whole process. And they're like, just defend it, change your topics later. No one cares. Just get the degree, kind of thing. Well, every time, Brad, that I went to finish that paper and to defend in front of my colleagues and mentors, I got sick again. Like out of nowhere. The autoimmune would come back. I couldn't breathe. My joints started turning colors. And I'm like, oh, no. I stubbornly tried twice while that's going on to do it. And I got too sick. Took a medical leave, later go back. On the third time I'm about to defend this paper, I don't get sick. I get a much more holier interruption. That beautiful indigo light that I had seen when I was exiting my NDE, the one that didn't communicate, decided it was ready to talk. And that's when my now soon-to-be 13-year-old son incarnated. And I felt him. I knew I had an intuitive child. I knew he was here. He was part of this work. And I did not know at that point that he was that beautiful indigo. I would not know until he was born. And he was born when they handed him to me. It was a pretty traumatic birth. And when they handed him to me, as he had some health issues, all of a sudden this booming indigo light came off of his crown chakra. And that's when I knew who he was and what his role there had been. And the green light would introduce himself 3 years later in my next son. So basically, I had, in that dark night of a soul, an ability to turn the gifts off because I was still receiving allopathic medication. And this is important and might be relevant to some of your listeners if they're as sensitive as me. Allopathic medication, the frequency of it, turns off my gifts. So they were giving me, for the pain, opiate medication at the time. Learning to walk again, going through all of that. And when I would take that medication, even if it was only once a day, for pain, it completely eradicated the gifts. Now, if you're someone who doesn't want your gifts, like you didn't ask to wake up this way, you start liking that you can turn them off, And it wasn't just the medication. I would learn certain foods turn them off. Hang out with certain kinds of people, they go away. Anything that's at a low frequency pulls it down, and higher frequencies activate it. And so I went through this dark night of the soul where I just didn't want anything to do with the gifts. I was taking the medication doctors gave me. It wasn't until towards the end of this 9-year journey when I realized if I don't work with these energies that are presenting itself and step into this new role, this new life, which has been gifted to me, I will be going back to the creator light. I'm not going to survive the way that I'm going. And it's not a pleasurable experience. So at that point, I decide I'm going to completely reject allopathy, and I'm going to go into natural healing and see what I can find out. And I happen to stumble to South America to study shamanism as I was learning that much of what I was experiencing was understood in shamanic cultures, and it wasn't something to pathologize and to label, it was celebrated. And so when I get down there, I don't even speak my story to one of the elders. He sees my frequency in my field and he said, "How long were you gone?" And I said 3.5 days. And he goes, "But you came in fully loaded." He's like, "It just activated." Like, he's like, "It's heightened." He's like, "But you've always been this way." And I was like, "Yeah, heightened's an understatement." I was like, I didn't see things before. I felt them and I intuited them and I sensed them, but now I'm seeing it. But he really normalized it for me. And once I had validation from someone who actually had a language of energy, who actually understood that this was a gift and that, I could communicate between worlds, and that was my purpose in coming back, and that more and more people were coming back like this. And soon, as he put it, more and more people would be awakening to these abilities within themselves. Once that gift was really received and embodied, the whole story changed. Because then it was, okay, how do I use this? How do I study it? How do I gift it to other people? And so that's what I did at that point. I started studying quantum physics. I started studying shamanism, started studying anything about the light body and consciousness that would assist me in using the gifts for the betterment of both myself and humanity.
Wow. Okay. So you tuned this by seeing the shaman, and he saw this in you instantly without hesitation. So that's interesting. And from there, you have now tuned your craft, and you're offering these skills to folks. And maybe you could, share how that works, and the focus of how you can bring this gift to others, because we can see now how it's really helped you, and you can kind of package this and turn it around and help others now.
Well, for me, as I said, psychology had been such a passion and such a purpose for a very long time. Yet when I needed it most, as I said, I just did not feel safe in those communities and in that whole really paradigm. So as I began researching NDEs to understand my own experience and to find peers, which is really what it was in the beginning, I wanted people that could understand me and that were like me. And that's how I found IANS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And once I started finding them, I noticed a gap in care. And the gap in care is that so many of us come back from these experiences dramatically transformed or on the brink of radical evolution. And yet we do not feel safe with clergy or with psychotherapists as a whole, because with clergy, you tend to have all of the dogma and the belief systems, and there's like a black and white kind of linear and rigidness to it. And some of us have a lot of religious trauma, as I did as a child who went to parochial school and had their abuse somewhat supported by the persons, in that system. So therefore, we don't feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, and yet you have a radically altered experience that you come out of, and you can't tell your family, and you don't feel safe with your church or your school or your own field, what do? I went through that all alone, and I was blessed to find IANS towards the last part of that first decade back. But not everyone knows that, and not everyone has that information. I happen to be studying psychology. IANS comes up in transpersonal psychology. We study near-death experiences. So there was an awareness there already for me that not everybody may have. So I decided I'm going to become the person I would have wanted when I woke up from coma, like someone that understands it all, has lived it. I can offer the baseline of my psychological understanding and all of the degrees that I've attained as a foundation. But then I will enhance that with different complementary, multidisciplinary modalities, such as neuroscience, such as shamanic energy medicine, such as different forms of meditation, tantra, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I took all of the things that I put in my toolbox, or as my teacher, Peter Levine, likes to say, your playbox, so that when you go in, you pick out toys, and you always like the toys because you put them in there. So in my toy box or my play box, I have all these skill sets. Well, now I can use those skill sets to teach other people. And so my work now is with mystical experiencers. Many are NDErs. Also, I work with a lot of highly sensitive children and highly sensitive persons, people that might identify as empaths or starseeds or something of that vernacular. But my role is to really be the bridge between the unseen and the tangible, and to give them very constructive, very real world oriented skill sets, whether it's bibliotherapy and books, whether it's, homeopathy recommendations. I mean, it goes on and on depending what they're working with, but I'm a bridge, and I facilitate and I teach and I give language and I teach them how to integrate these experiences that they're going through. And I understand the ebb and the flow of integration, because for those of us that have had these experiences, integration will never end. It is something that we are constantly, every day that we awake, every day we are gifted, we are coming back into an awareness. And so I support them in a way I did not feel I could lovingly receive from the medical establishment and from the religion of origin I grew in. So I'm just really an anchor, and my highest compliment is to teach other experiencers and then have them go about in their embodied resonance, in that pure column of light, and pay that forward to our awakening world. So it's really about teaching and healing together, and then allowing that person to become the instrument of teaching and healing in our world.
Yes, give them, and so they can continue to give others. And it's great. You have this well-rounded background of a kind of very technical and science-based training, as well as sort of art form of this with the shamanics, and then the knowing of having the experience yourself. You blend all that together to help people no matter where they're coming from in this. A lot of the folks that come and watch these podcasts are those that may have lost someone, and so they want to hear about the other side, to know that it's there, and that's of comfort. Others might have had similar information or experiences like this and really not know how to process it and deal with it. And it sounds like these podcasts certainly help them with integration. And your services do also. Where would they go to connect with you on those?
You can find me at my website. So it's www.brooke, with an E, Grove, Grove, healing.com. And there's a contact page, and you can contact me through that.
Good. Well, hey, and that is in the description down below. So just go below and click and enjoy. Well, hey, I have this other section that I really want to share with you, and it's called Heart's First Whisper. So it's a series of questions that I have all packaged up for you. You got to use your heart to answer, not your mind or your thoughts. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Oh, good. All right. Well, here's the first question then. Number one is, what part of your soul contract feels most alive right now, and what part still scares you a little?
I'd say I feel the most alive is feeling humanity waking up right now. Like, it's super exciting, and it just keeps intensifying. So I love that. It's electric. What part scares me a little? The shadow. I mean, there's an aspect of my inner children that I have to have radical compassion for, and constantly remother and treat with kindness. And to the ego and to the mind, that can get exhausting and tiring sometimes. But those inner children kept me here. So I owe them my reverence, but they can scare me.
Exactly. And the ego and the mind are fairly relentless also. So Yeah, you always have to be on your toes there. All right. Well, hey, that takes us to number 2 is when those beings held you, what truth landed that you still lean on today?
There was an awareness. Again, it was felt, it was sensory. But I feel it. I feel it in the heart as I say that too. Um, there was an awareness given to me as they held me that everything comes from these lights and that creator light. And therefore, I am that light. You are that light. Everything is that light. And so it's not that I need to reach out for this external holding. It's about falling into that spark internally and nurturing it. So just remembering that, that same light that brought me that ineffable peace is also part of me, and I can be a creator of that peace.
Aha. So we are a spark of the flame, each and every one of us.
Yes.
And that actually really feeds right into the next question. Spark, flame, light. You followed a flashlight home. What lights do you follow now when life goes dim?
I'm super sensitive to smile medicine, as the shamans of old call it, where it's just like, some people have that like electric ability with their face to just, almost like heal. And I just love looking for that anywhere I can find it. Like yesterday, I saw an unhoused person on the street with the most immaculate, pure, beautiful smile. And I know he felt me receive it because he just kept beaming it and looking right at me. And it's little things like that. Beauty is medicinal for me. So anything that I can create, again, whether it's color, flowers, fragrance, anything where I can create a beautiful environment, that helps me too. So, as I said, I still have this severe asthma, and there's times where I'm on a nebulizer for hours at a time. And I have to choose to look for those things. Whether it's the beauty in my plants in my home or my child sleeping and smiling in his sleep. Those little things bring the light back to me. So really surrounding myself in and consciously cultivating beauty so that the beauty is there when the lights go dim. So that when I look around, no matter how gray everything can feel or how heavy and dense, I have gratitude. And that, literally yesterday I was having severe asthma attacks and I was overwhelmed by it. And I just noticed how pretty this one room was. And it literally was like, oh, I'm so grateful for this. And again, that gratitude helps alleviate some of that dimness.
Wow, Brooke, that is amazing. So many people have different reasons and causes of various pain, and some of it is chronic. And for a person to be in the middle of that and to find gratitude in something that's around them, one, it might distract them away from the condition, and they might escape it for a moment. But it also feels like it has that internal healing effect that you were talking about earlier also. So all the benefits from that are amazing. And I also like what you said about the smile, which is, the world is a mirror. If you smile at it, chances are it very well may smile back. But sometimes you want the world to smile at you so you can smile back at it. And that feels like that person that you saw. And that you look for these people that have these crazy, amazing electric smiles, and you're going to feel the benefits. But when that person goes into the world, they're ripples on the pond. They're helping others feel better too.
Yes.
Beautiful. Number 4, where did love first reappear in your reintegration? An ordinary moment that felt holy.
When my son was 3, we were reading a bedtime story. And as I told you, Brad, I knew he was intuitive. I did not want to indoctrinate him to be like me, though. So I didn't teach him, my ways of doing things or any of my intuitive tools at that point. And yet we're sitting there reading this book, and it happened to be on the cosmos and outer space and planets and all of this stuff. And he tenderly touched my hand and he says, "Mama, thank you for picking me in the stars. Thank you for coming back." And I was just like, whoa. Like, I'd been praying that he gave me a direct sign to start speaking to him about stuff. That was more than I ever anticipated. And he's continued, that was almost 10 years ago, to just have these truth bombs. Like when the this is another one that's the same child. When the pandemic began, he was in first grade and they were canceling school, and our whole family situation was also changing at that time. And I was just overwhelmed with emotion. And I'm about to tell him why school's being canceled, and I'm just so overwhelmed with emotion. And I don't hide my emotions from my children. I want them to understand that they're messengers and that we need to work with them to be healthy. And so I look at him and I say, "Oh, my sweet boy, this is what's going on." And he, again, tenderly puts his hand out and tells me to stop. And he goes, "I know all about it. Spirit's calling it the great undoing. We're going to let it all fall apart and then we're going to build it all back up. That's what I'm here for." And I was just like,
Are you kidding? How in the world did he know that?
He's going through what I call a latency phase, where he's not as in touch with his spiritual gifts right now, but he's always had that just like ability. And for me, as an intuitive child that had their gifts stigmatized and shamed and was called witchcraft and all of the things as a child, having a child that's like you, that has your gifts, but also has the confidence and is articulate enough to express it and trust you enough, there is something deeply, profoundly healing about that. So for me, those moments were most definitely holy.
Wow. That is an amazing story. I don't know how many parents have similar stories. I guess in these days, there could be more and more children that are being born that are, children of the light. It's possible. But, it's interesting how that just dovetails right into the next question, which is, what have the indigo and green lights, your children, taught you about purpose?
My boys, I won't disclose their names, but I will say this. You referenced bringing heaven to earth earlier. My children's names, the indigo has a Sanskrit name, which is related to heaven, and the green has a Viking name, which is related to earth. And I always joke that they incarnated right when I needed them most to kind of anchor me back into the body, because I can be so off in the ethers and like ungrounded and all of those things. The indigo son, my eldest, the intuitive one, he has really taught me about confidence. I lacked a lot of it. My confidence came from my education. It came from, what I was good at, on paper before having them. And he's taught me to be confident in my bliss, to be confident in my joy, to be confident in my expression. So much of what I do now has been inspired by his resolve and his certitude. And he does it in a way that's quiet and yet is very firm. And I find that deeply grounding. My green light, he's my little earth seed. He's the one that really grounds us. I think his brother and I would probably float off if he didn't have the little green light. He has really taught me to love and have radical curiosity and compassion and creativity for the human body. He is a kinesthetic learner. He uses his body to express himself, and he's super animated when he plays. And for me, the body did feel like a prison for a very, very, very long time. And through him, I've started to see the body as this magical laboratory that does all these really cool things and is so miraculous in all of its knowingness and its beingness. So, that's the thesis of what they've taught me. But I would say the greatest love language of these two beautiful lights has been a return to play. I feel I never really got to have a childhood. And then I rushed into, adulting so fast and furious and spent most of my youth recovering from coma. And so when they entered my life 3 years after coma, and which was also super, super, super important because I was in a 3-day coma, 3 organs, 3 angels, and, my son was born on the 3rd in 2013. I mean, 3s just come up again and again and again. And so they've just really taught me to play and to be that being in this human vessel is a gift. And that perception, just embodying that perception and allowing, softening enough to allow that perception changes everything, because then I can embrace the asthma because I know it's a temporal experience I can pivot from. I can make it funny. I can make a soundtrack to my nebulizing, like whatever, anything that brings me joy into what could be a moment of despair. They've really gifted me that. So in a way, they've been a sacred mirror for play and just really rediscovering the miracle of our humanity.
Wow. To make sure you remind yourself of joy, and then bringing that back into gratitude, as we talked about before, can change sort of everything. These kids are pretty amazing. I think once they get old enough, we should have all three of you back on the podcast.
That would be fun. My eldest has actually spoke with me on NDEs when he was 8. He spoke for IANS on the wisdom of intuitive children.
Ah, all right.
Yeah, we would love to meet with you.
Beautiful. Well, that sounds like a deal then, for sure. And well, that brings us into number 6 here, which is the trauma that you mentioned. And I know you can overcome it with joy and gratitude, but it might still peek up its head on a time to time. And you mentioned that too. But when it does visit, how do you greet that old friend? And what's your first step to alchemize it?
The first, and this is not unique to trauma, although it's a great catalyst for sure, is, as I said a few moments ago, is the intimacy of our emotions. For me, as a complex trauma survivor, my nervous system was wrecked by so much of the violence that I endured in my childhood. And then later I went through domestic violence. And so that really programs the body into a really rigid fight or flight, or freeze or appease, whichever is your go-to. And so there are times, like I can give you an example. We've had a lot of fireworks in Los Angeles County this year, and not for the 4th of July, just across the board. And when you have complex PTSD and fireworks are going off nonstop and you jump because of loud noises and you're not expecting them, it can be tense. Your nervous system is kind of always ready to go when that's happening. And I believe it was June, they went off all month, and it was very hard for my system. So I have to stop completely and surrender to the activation and know that, yes, I'm activated. Yes, I'm aware that this is bothering me. Yes, there's a trigger, but there is a pause point before you react, before you respond. And that's where you create the response. If I can pause, if I can welcome that old friend. In tantric meditation, they consider all messengers, all emotions, messengers that are invitations. So if trauma is the invitation that pokes up in the day from a firework or stubbing your toe or whatever, then the pause becomes, okay, I feel my anxiety. I feel my heart racing. I feel all of these things. Okay, I'm feeling it now. There's an awareness. Okay, and now how may I treat that feeling with compassion? How may I meet that feeling? As you said, greet it as an old friend. That's what becomes really important, is again, shifting that perspective instead of, oh, here's trauma again. Oh, I'm going down that, that energy of ick creates a bigger ick response. But if it's, okay, I'm activated. Okay, my heart's going a little fast. Okay, all right, what can I do just to pause? And then greet the emotion, feel the emotion. I would say the holiest, most radical way to alchemize something is to be fully with it. Too often, we want to not go down, we want to not choose something negative or not do the old ways or whatever, the pattern response for the trauma. And yet, so we don't respond that way. Maybe we have the awareness to not respond that way, but we also don't feel the emotion. We try to push it away or table it. And that suppressed emotion, when we do that, it just goes back on the shelf so that the next time trauma comes to greet, the trigger is going to be bigger. So the most important part is feeling it. With my sensitivities, because I feel everybody's stuff and can see it as well, there are days where it's like I wake up and I'm like, oh, this is a grief day. We're going to feel humanity's grief because everyone's purging, so much right now as the world shifts and evolves. And so that's okay. I don't fight the grief. I don't try to change the grief. I don't deny the grief either, but I don't surrender to it. It's about the intimacy of being naked with whatever arises emotionally without having to fix or control the outcome. Just by being present with it, you dissolve so much of the activation, because all emotions, no matter what they are, just want to be witnessed and seen, and like everything else, returned to love.
Wow, that last section there is literally so amazingly powerful right there. Don't react to the triggers, but in some ways be the observer of them, and then do participate in them and let them wash over you and get the full use out of them, but don't suffer. Don't take it any further than that. And then potentially you won't repeat that anymore. So you articulated that so unbelievably well. I just love that last answer. And that brings us to our final question, number 7, which is, if you could send one sentence backwards to ICU you, what would it say?
That's a good one. Honestly, that it's all worth it. It's all been worth it. I don't think I would have imagined, because in those first days in ICU, I wasn't really happy about my decision to come back. I wanted to go back in and change that whole decision. But it's all worth it. Every element of it, I'm not gonna bypass the trauma and saying that I would want anyone or myself to go through any of that again. Yet the rewards of doing the inner work are so, so, so worth it. And there's a power you get from each and every time you go through a new layer of the underworld. So I'm just so grateful. And I would tell that girl, it's all going to be worth it. And you got this.
Yeah. And that girl at that moment in time could have used that confidence builder, since you're totally at the bottom of the pile underneath all of those issues that were going on. Now you seem to come out of it. And it seems like oftentimes you do need to get to the dark night of the soul. You need to go through this earth-shattering rock bottomness, to get your full attention and to get you back to where you are today. And it's a shining example. So, Brooke, this has been an amazing podcast. I think everything you shared today, you just had me on the edge of my seat. I just loved all your wisdom. And, I got to ask you, if there's anything left in the tank, as we close this down, do you have one little summary you'd like to share for folks as we part with them?
Just that you're loved. It's so easy to forget that we are unconditionally loved from that ineffable light that we sprang forth. And no matter what you're doing or who you're doing it with, and what your day-to-day is like, you are an instrument of God's love, and you are loved exactly as you are, without judgment, without any agenda. You are love. And just really hold that sacred, because it can carry you through some tsunamis. Trust me.
Well, that is the greatest advice ever. And I think people will take that with them, especially when they see your smile as you tell them that is the ultimate truth. So, Brooke, thank you for being with us, from ICU glass walls to cosmos and back, and then showing how to turn pain into medicine. And you know what? We'll definitely link to your website, as you mentioned it before, so listeners can explore your integrated approach for NDErs and sensitive souls like yourself, because that is so amazing. It's a beautiful website. So just go in the description below and click it. And, as always, this isn't medical advice, just hard-earned wisdom and love from those that have a lot of it in their heart. Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you so much, Brad. It was an honor. It was really fun.
Beautiful. And it was an honor for me too. And I thank you. And to our listeners, if Brooke's insights moved you, please like and subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, click that button. It's easy. And then you'll get all these great future episodes right in your inbox. And feel free to share, and leave a note down below. I answer all the comments. I love getting in there and having conversations with folks in the world, that's for sure. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and go beyond the illusion to discover your true self. Take care, everyone, and bye for now.